Welcome to today's webcast. This call is being recorded. And now to begin the program, I'd like to turn the event over to Tracy Cook. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Hello and welcome everyone to the webcast, the next MSP Killer Combo, Cloud Desktops and File Sync, sponsored by Itopia. I'm Tracy Cook with Redmond Channel Partner, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation today. If you would like additional details during the presentation, don't be shy. Just submit your questions into the Ask a Question box on the left side of the console. We're very happy to answer your questions in real time instead of having you wait until the end of the presentation. Also, the entire webcast is being recorded and will be archived for future viewing, and we'll send you an email when the replay is available, and that should be in approximately 24 to 48 hours, and you'll use the same link that you used today. And now I'd like to introduce the speakers. Today we have two excellent speakers joining us. Coming up a little later is Matt Dugan, a Senior Product Manager at eFolder, where he runs the Anchor File Sync and Collaboration tool. Matt has a passion for solving problems through technology, and he continues to serve MSPs worldwide with a focus on data protection for the last 7 years. And starting us off today is Ted Holsey, Chief Revenue Officer at Itopia. Ted is Itopia's Channel Chief and responsible for all revenue generation activities, including sales and marketing. An industry veteran and leading expert on the cloud computing space, Ted has spent more than a decade helping MSPs successfully manage migration to the cloud. So we're in great shape today, and I'd like to pass the event over to Ted. Ted, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Tracy, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Let's have a quick peek at the agenda so you know what's in store. I'm going to make a couple introductory remarks on the space and then introduce cloud desktop and cloud workspace technology that's enabled by Itopia. And then I'm going to hand the baton over to Matt Dugan, who's going to talk about file sync and collaboration. And the overall theme for today's discussion is how these two technology categories and product categories really fit together, and how MSPs can be the ones who really bring these technologies together for clients and solve some really interesting problems for your clients. We'll conclude with some comments about the end-to-end solution, and we'll do a formal Q&A section at the end, but we really want to encourage you. We're monitoring the Q&A section live, so if you have questions as we go along, please submit them, and we'll be taking brief pauses here and there to answer questions that have come in throughout the discussion. So let's get into just some kind of introductory remarks about the overall marketplace. So when the overall market we're really talking about in today's discussion is what we might call workspace as a service, and what we mean by that is turning compute and application delivery into a service that MSPs can go out there and deliver. There's a lot of different jargon and terminology, and generally speaking, I'll just make the comment, when we're talking about either cloud desktops or cloud workspaces, we're really using those terms interchangeably. It's all about, a cloud desktop you might consider just like, hey, a vanilla desktop experience delivered from the cloud. And a workspace would be a more comprehensive way of thinking about it, where it's not just the desktop, it's the line of business applications, it's potentially things like SQL databases, and it's other software assets like a file sync and share solution baked into the overall offering. And so, if you think about it, it's like, okay, we need to deliver to clients all the software and applications, security tools that they need to get their work done, and that's their workplace, and we can sell that as a service, and that dovetails very nicely with the MSP business model. So that's really the overall market we're talking about today. The point of this slide is just to share that this market is growing at about almost 15% on a compounded annual growth rate, and the reason that's so important for MSPs is when you're thinking about growth, when you're thinking about the next 5 to 10 years of your business, you want to have tools in your product portfolio that are going to be growing at a double-digit rate so that your revenue can be growing at something similar to that. I mean, that's the holy grail in this business. In order to drive really interesting bottom-line profitability, you have to be driving an interesting top line, and you need to be delivering solutions that are highly relevant to your clients but also have a nice secular push behind them as well in terms of growth. Let's talk a little bit about what we mean in just a very practical level about cloud desktops or workspace as a service. So today we have the vast majority of small businesses out there have on-premises infrastructure. And there's a huge push to the cloud, as we all know. That's obvious. And the reality is there's all sorts of different applications and experiences and infrastructure that's migrating to the cloud. And let's talk about what Itopia specifically enables. And so really we've partnered very closely with Google Cloud, and Google Cloud is one of the hyperscale cloud offerings, infrastructure as a service players. Amazon, of course, is another. Microsoft Azure is another. And when we're working with MSPs today, we're really helping them take traditional on-premises Windows deployment and migrating those to the cloud, and then leveraging things like compute, storage, bandwidth, the APIs and security that you can get from the likes of a Google Cloud, and then running Windows technologies in the cloud to deliver a desktop experience to the users. And the value proposition of doing that is kind of twofold. On the one hand, we want to be able to offer clients an anytime, anywhere, any device type computing experience, but we also want to deliver that experience in a highly secure, highly controlled, highly data controlled experience that's easy to support, easy to manage, and easy to deploy so that MSPs can be profitable. And that's really where Itopia comes in. We are a cloud automation and cloud management software tool that really assists MSPs with migrating the Windows experience to the cloud and delivering desktop as a service or workspace as a service to clients. We've partnered with Google. And I'm going to talk in a moment why we think Google is a great choice for your Windows infrastructure. But I think really it's important in our mind always to start things out and to talk about, okay, what does Itopia do versus what does Google do? Itopia, we are a software tool that we sell to MSPs to help you automate your journey to the cloud. And then Google provides the actual underlying infrastructure in the cloud and the Windows Server licenses that enable a workspace delivery from the cloud. Why have we partnered with Google? Google, Amazon, of course, AWS is the market share leader, and Microsoft and Google are really, very focused on catching up with Amazon. But Google is really the best place, in our view, to be running your Windows infrastructure today for a number of different reasons. First of all, Google's opening up data centers, and so their data center density, both in the United States and globally, is very high, which is very important for a cloud workspace type delivery model because latency is relevant when you're delivering the desktop experience from the cloud. So you want to be able to provision these services from a data center that's very close to your clients. Google is Google. They have over 8 different applications that have over 1 billion users. They run the best data centers in the world, so the speed and capability of Google is second to none. Google employs over 750 software or security experts on their staff to make sure that their cloud is the most secure in the world. And Google is doing some great stuff on the pricing front. Per second billing, previously that was per minute billing, now it's per second billing. But there's a whole host of different innovations that they're making that really deliver on the promise of cloud computing. The cloud should be elastic, affordable, no upfront cost, the ability to scale, and Google is really delivering on that promise from a pricing perspective. And then really they're continuing to invest. They've dumped $29 billion into Google Cloud in the past 3 years, and it's Google's largest. It's Google's now largest division from a headcount perspective, and they're hiring like crazy. So we really think this is a future-proof bet, and that Google is going to continue to win share in the overall marketplace. So
hey,
when we're
Ted,
talking, yes.
we have a question I'd like to ask
Go ahead.
you, and they are asking. Let's see. What desktop operating systems are supported, like Mac OS or Windows? And they're saying, in other words, can Itopia deploy Apple Mac workstations on Google?
Okay, so the answer to that question is no. I mean, when we're talking today really about the Windows desktop experience. It's how do we deliver Windows. Now, the beauty of Workspace as a Service or cloud workspaces is that users can bring their Mac device to the workplace, so to speak, and then just get their Windows desktop delivered from the cloud, or employees can access their desktop from literally any kind of device in their home office or from the road or wherever. That is kind of one of the beauties of Workspace as a Service. So really what we're talking about here is Windows. And more specifically, we're actually talking about delivering the Windows desktop experience from the Windows Server operating system. So what we build out in Google Cloud with our software automation tool and what we enable MSPs to do is you're really running either Windows Server 2012 or Windows Server 2016, and then you're serving up session-based desktops that are customized and secured and customized for that particular user at the client. And so a Server 2012 would deliver a Windows 8.1 experience, and a Server 2016 would deliver a Windows 10 desktop experience. And then so we're really using RDS technology from Microsoft, and that means that the RDP client can be deployed to any kind of device. We're talking legacy Windows infrastructure, Macintoshes, thin clients, iOS devices like an iOS tablet, an Apple tablet, Android, you name it. If you can run RDP on it, you can access your desktop experience. And so hopefully that answers that question and clarifies it a bit. But just to make a couple other comments about the Itopia platform in general, we help with discovery, migration, and management of this entire workload. And it's really all about automation. This slide's a bit of an eye chart, but the whole point here is if you were going to go out as an MSP and do this today on your own, you would have to go find your own data center space, provision all of the hardware, pay for all of those ongoing colo expenses, make all the software investments, design your own workflow, and then you'd have a whole host of different ongoing management tasks. And really with Google and Itopia today, we vastly simplify and streamline this overall deployment scenario and experience for MSPs, literally automating over 200 different discrete tasks an MSP would have to do. And we compress that into a easy-to-use SaaS-based application, which streamlines and automates all of the workflow around deploying and managing the cloud workspace. I'm going to make a few comments about some of the cool use cases for the Itopia software, and then I'm going to talk about some of the issues and opportunities to even improve upon what we do, and then that's going to be a transition where I'll then hand it to Matt to talk about the Anchor solution.
Hey, Ted.
So let's talk. Yes.
Before you go ahead, we do have another question, and they're talking about VDI. So they're asking, so not VDI. Do you support VDI?
Yeah, so important. That's an important clarification always. So what Itopia enables in the Google Cloud is not VDI in the kind of formal sense. VDI is really virtualizing a desktop operating system on a single VM. And that is one way to deliver a virtualized desktop experience to your users and clients. That's not what we're doing here. We're using instead RDS technology running from the server. But let me also just add, though, one of the things you can do with the Itopia solution is you can do a one-to-one VM running in Google Cloud. So if you do have power users who need a really kind of bespoke experience for their virtual desktop, and you need it to be attached to SSD storage or have, extra performance characteristics, that's also something you can do with Itopia and Google Cloud. But in general, we're really talking about using RDS, or what was traditionally called terminal services technology, to deliver the desktop experience. So in the next couple of minutes, what I just want to do is touch on a couple different use cases for how the Itopia software automates the experience for you, the MSP. So the first is what we call discovery. This is anytime you're going to be migrating clients to the cloud, there's a lot of complexity around the existing environment. And what discovery does is it allows you to either on a host-by-host basis or on the whole network discover all the users, all of the Active Directory settings, all of the applications currently in use at the client, and then we take that and inventory it and populate it into the Itopia provisioning engine. And what that allows us to do is when we build out the new Windows Server environment in the Google Cloud, it gives us the ability to customize and configure that new environment so it meets the needs of your users. The other point is just when we talk about let me get through these 4 points and then we'll get to some more questions.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So when we talk about automation, what are we doing in fact? So when you as an MSP look at the public cloud today, it's incredibly powerful, but it's also complex. And so to build a workspace up in the Google Cloud, as an example, you need to provision and configure a whole bunch of resources in Google Cloud, and you need to have very good skills with the Windows stack to deploy these sorts of environments. And what Itopia does is we automate all of the very labor-intensive work around deployment and configuration of that environment. And so literally you fill out all the key details about this client and what you want to deploy to the cloud. You hit launch to cloud, and the Itopia software goes and automates the actual build-out of the Google Cloud infrastructure and the Windows Server infrastructure to deliver this offering. Two interesting use cases from a management perspective. Server uptime scheduling. One of the promises of the cloud is elastic computing, the ability to turn resources on and off. And if you think about your clients today, you probably have a lot of clients who have either task-based workers or hourly-based workers, and these folks, work 9 to 5. They come in, they need to access their desktop, but they're not, logging it. They're not knowledge workers or executives or people on the road. These folks need their desktop during business hours. And if you think about the cloud, wouldn't you want to be able to turn off certain resources at night to save money? And that's what server uptime scheduling does. We already talked about how Google provides per-second billing, and what the Itopia software gives the ability to do is for certain clients, if these are their requirements, you can actually turn off infrastructure at night so that their desktop, those cloud desktops actually aren't consuming server resources at night, which can save you and your clients a ton of money or potentially juice your profit margins. And then last but not least is so there's a functionality called Google Snapshots, and this gives you the ability to this is your DR capability in the Google Cloud, and Itopia gives you a host of different capabilities to customize the retention schedules and frequency of the Google Snapshot function so that you can tailor your disaster recovery strategy on those cloud resources to the needs of your clients. Itopia, we're very focused on making sure that our solution is integrated with all of the key tools that MSPs use today. Just about 2 weeks ago, we announced our integration with ConnectWise, and we have a whole host of other integrations planned down the pike. So at this point, what I'm going to do is just wrap up and make just a couple comments and then hand the baton to Matt. But if you think about it, this slide could be, I could have another 30 logos up on this slide. But these, to me, are what are some of the most popular and I think familiar software solutions on the market today that integrate with the whole cloud workspace stack. So we've talked about Google Cloud at the infrastructure layer. We've talked about the Windows Server at the operating system layer. We've talked about Itopia as your automation and management tool for the cloud. Once you start moving more and more infrastructure to the cloud, the network becomes much more strategic. So we highly recommend in better levels of redundancy for most small businesses in terms of their network connectivity. So whether you're using Meraki or SonicWall or WatchGuard or whatever, you want to make sure that you're building in a lot of resiliency into the network and using tools like Avik for network management so that you can control, understand, monitor, and repair networks when and if they're having issues. And then these other software tools are highly relevant. You still are managing Windows at the end of the day, so you still need things like your RMM tool, and you need Office productivity applications, and there's a whole host of different ways to do that, whether you're working with Office 365 or the G Suite or some other solution. And then today we're going to talk more specifically, though, about how business-grade file sync can work together with a cloud workspace experience. And what I want to just point out is that I've kind of been talking about all the wonderful things about cloud desktops and cloud workspaces, but there are some gaps in the solution, and let's talk about what some of those are. Yes, you can fire up a Windows desktop experience from your Android phone or from your iPhone. It's not it's technically possible, but it's not a wonderful experience. And if you're an on-the-go busy professional or an employee who spends all their time in the field, you don't want to necessarily just to share a single file have to fire up a cloud desktop. So smartphone productivity is an area where you can combine cloud workspaces with a business-grade file sync solution to enable smartphone productivity. When you migrate a client to the cloud, and you have one of the things you migrate there, of course, is the file server. Now, that doesn't change the fact that sharing large files over email even from a cloud-hosted file server is not the right way to share large files. So that's another area where we need to be thinking about how do we empower and enable the client and the user. The traditional file server is great. In the diagrams I showed you earlier, when we're moving from on-prem to cloud, we're still talking about a traditional file server. Traditional file servers have a lot of great attributes. They're familiar, they're fast, either locally or in the cloud, and they're a consistent metaphor that the user knows and is familiar with. However, they don't get the job done in all different scenarios, and we're going to talk about that more in a moment. The other thing is that workspaces, there's lots of different users, and a cloud workspace isn't the right solution for every single user. If you have very graphical or engineering-intensive tasks, a local high-end workstation or a Mac might be the right choice. And even within a given company, you might have 80 to 90% of the workforce on a cloud workspace deployment because that's how you want to deploy the Windows experience. However, you still may have local users who have different kinds of computing needs. And the key challenge there is how do you keep everybody on the same page from a content perspective? And that's where, again, file sync and collaboration can come into play. And then last but not least, another gap is the road warrior. There's executives, there's people who are on the road all the time, and broadband connectivity is not ubiquitous. When you're out in rural areas or you're out in the field, you may be out on a construction site, you may be in an airplane. There are many, many instances where you may not have sufficient connectivity to get to your cloud workspace, but you still want to have access to your files. And that, again, is where business-grade file sync can come in. So with that, what I want to do now is turn the floor over to Matt. And Matt can share with you a little bit about the Anchor solution and tell you how we can maybe fill in some of these gaps. Matt.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ted. And yeah, thank you everyone for your interest here. And that's a great segue. I appreciate the intro. And Anchor is definitely more than just file sync and share. So when you think about file sync and share, you're thinking about access to your data and the ability to share or send that data out and distribute it to others. But what Anchor brings is kind of this invincible productivity concept. And what that concept is the invincible part is protecting your data with all of these data protection features and disaster recovery features married to productivity. So the ability to collaborate with others in real time on the web in a collaborative web editor, all protected with the umbrella of the Anchor tool. And so as I go through these slides and give you a little bit of an introduction into this collaboration tool, I encourage you all to ask questions. Some of my teammates here, Tracy and Ted, they're going to be taking a look at the questions and they'll be able to interrupt me at any time. And we also have a dedicated QA session following this. So I typically go a little bit quick, so just give a shout if there's anything I need to reiterate or revisit, and I'll be happy to do so. But ultimately, Anchor is empowering you as an MSP to give your clients peace of mind productivity while driving your high margin recurring revenue. And so we have, competitors in the space that you might know about of Dropbox, Box, Ignite, even Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive. And Anchor differentiates from all of those players with very specific focus on data protection and disaster recovery and not passing any of your data to third-party providers. All of the data will exist and remain in that secure cloud. So we're very much focused on the actual data protection and disaster recovery side. So let's just go ahead and take a little trip down the Anchor intro here. The agenda is to talk about the MSP pain and the file sync and share market. And then I'll be introducing Anchor in a little bit more detail, showing you a couple of screenshots of some features. And then we'll talk about value proposition for clients like your end users, and then also value proposition for yourself, the MSPs. So if we start first with the MSP pain and the file sync and share market, we talk about what our goal is, and we want to make clients happy and keep their data safe, all while making a profit and growing our business. So we've got barriers to data. This is like data distribution and sharing of content and organization of content. If you think about some of the most complex infrastructures like a massive SharePoint deployment versus a very simple consumer level Dropbox or Google Drive, where it's very simple to just share and collaborate, but it lacks a lot of that security. We want to take all of those complexities of deployment and management and reduce that into a very set it and forget it mentality to automate all of that. And the end user experience is very seamless and intuitive as a result. So we've got that, the barriers to data distribution, the sharing obstacles, as I've mentioned, and the lack of integration options. So this is a massive pain for MSPs who have specific tools like remote monitoring and management tools or professional services automation tools, even user authentication tools such as Active Directory. And then also a pain is low margins. As MSPs, you collect all of these tools and you present a solution and services on top of that solution. And then you find that you're just not really stacking a lot of money at the end of the day because there aren't many margins to work with. And that's where eFolder comes in with the Anchor product to really provide you massive margins. And we can talk a little bit more detail about that in a second. And then also security threats. And the biggest security threat that plagues the IT channel right now and the entire IT industry is that buzzword ransomware. And ransomware infections happen all the time. And Anchor has features to protect you against ransomware infections. And in the event that there is an infection, we have industry best protection and then industry best recovery features to get you right back up and running in no time. There's limited downtime, so your recovery time objective is very small. So a little bit of background on the file sync and share market, and I'm going to go quickly through this slide, is just kind of the evolution of file sharing. So we have your standard email attachments, and as Ted alluded to, you have limitations there even where certain file size limits happen and extensions for things that you want to share. So for example, if you try to share a .exe, which is an executable file, also maybe considered an application, if you try to share that via email, typically email systems will flag that and mark it as spam or a threatening email, and it will not be delivered. So by using email attachments, you encounter a lot of obstacles and barriers to collaboration. And then also, as Ted alluded to, with the file server, it's a great piece of equipment. There are some challenges at times with networking requirements for virtual private networks, even FTP servers, for example. These things require certain protocols to access this data, and occasionally you have to be on site, or from a remote location you have to go through all of these hoops to get access to this data, and that can be very challenging and also very costly for businesses because they have their IT team focused on constantly supporting the access of data rather than having an always on, anytime access, anywhere type of system. And then that's where this file sync and share market comes into play, where we, with Anchor, our focus is to take that file server and cloud enable it. So we want to put the entire file system in the cloud where you have opportunities of entire collaboration and everybody gets to work in that space rather than having to fragment the data outside of that space in order to be productive. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about Anchor and what it is and how it works. So Anchor empowers users to be able to access any of the content that they need and to be able to share and collaborate with anyone that they'd like to, not just Anchor users. You can collaborate with people outside of the system that are regarded as guest accounts. And so we have the eFolder Cloud here on the Anchor SaaS system, which is in the U.S., Canada, and Europe, geo-redundant locations to serve those specific regions. And you can see number 1 and number 2 are kind of these endpoints, desktops, laptops, tablets, mobile devices. These all remain in sync with the data that's on the cloud based on the things that you are choosing to sync down. So selectively choosing what you want to store on those local devices. And it's kind of an always-on approach where we'll always remain in sync. And additionally, the third key component there is a file server. And you can choose to rip and replace your infrastructure, or you can choose to keep it in a hybrid model. And how that works is you would essentially take the desktop client application. You would install that on the file server, and you would cloud enable that. And I think Ted's going to touch a little bit more on that a little bit later, and so I'm not going to dive too deeply into that. But once that content is up on the cloud and it's been synced up to the cloud, then all of that data can propagate down to all of those endpoints that need access to that data. And by doing that, you can choose to maintain that hardware infrastructure and that file server just as it exists today. Because some MSPs are averse, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of approach, and we absolutely understand that. So we want to empower you to be able to do both at the same time. So get the cloud security, get that redundancy and that recoverability established immediately. And if you feel like you want to hold on to this file server, the physical device that's on site, you can, and it's no problem. Or some of you a little bit more forward thinking and you want to eliminate that entire liability of that hardware. Because as we say, hardware eventually breaks while software eventually works. So you might want to get rid of that file server entirely. All of your data will be up in the cloud. You'll be able to take advantage of all of the data protection, disaster recovery, and collaboration features of Anchor. So let's talk a little bit more detail on those specific features. And we'll start with the value propositions here. So we've got 5 main core issues here that we talked about and the pain for the MSP. And so with the barriers to data distribution, what we've answered to that pain with is a seamless user experience where you can access your data anywhere, anytime, and you can organize your data in very intuitive ways so that people know where to go to get stuff, searchability, recoverability, revision history if they want to go to a previous version of a file, and the ability, so here with sharing obstacles, which would be the next step. So once you get your data organized, then how do you get people to be collaborating over it? And so the sharing obstacles answer from Anchor is this secure collaboration approach. And that's kind of where that invincible productivity side of life comes from. That productivity aspect specifically is a native collaborative web editor that allows you to create and edit PowerPoint presentations, spreadsheets, and documents. And you can even run presentations from the collaborative web editor. So all remains secure under the secure umbrella of Anchor, and you can run it in a private cloud, or you can choose to run it in our secure SaaS environments, as I've indicated the specific regions there. There's also a lack of integration options that MSPs have a pain with, and so with Anchor, we've built out a ton of automation. So we integrate directly with professional services automation tools such as Autotask and ConnectWise, and we do automated billing and ticketing. So there are alerting. So let's say a file server goes offline for more than 5 minutes. You can generate an alert to be sending an automatic ticket into your PSA system to create a ticket for your service team to be able to address right away about a file server being offline. That can also send text messages automated to you and even email automation. And then beyond that, we have all of these different checks and balances where you can set it and forget it, as I said, with isolated, it's a multi-tenant interface that at one single user interface on the web for an administrator to go in and manage all different client organizations and organize them in very, a la carte method to specify any policies that they want. So if one organization needs to be in absolute lockdown privacy where the MSP should not have access to their data, we have a feature called Privacy Mode that denies the MSP access to the data. However, the MSP can still manage the policies for that organization, like do they need two-factor authentication across all users? Do they need to secure all of their share links to make sure that user authentication is required to access that content, which is better than a password-protected share, and which is also then better than a public share, which anybody with the share link has access to. So another pain that MSPs face is, the low margins here. So as I said, high margin recurring revenue. We sell it at anywhere from, $10 a user or a seat down to, on SaaS down to $5 if you're, doing a large deployment. And then also on private cloud, we can get down just below that $5 marker. And that allows you as an MSP to essentially establish yourself with 100% profits there. So you can actually sell this for $20 to $25 a seat. We have some partners that are even selling it for $30 to $35 a seat because they're a la carte, adding a single itemization of specific features like file server enablement, ransomware recovery and rollback, data protection, and then file and folder level backup. And all of these, coupled with the secure web collaborative web editor, they can all drive additional sales and to warrant a price increase and more profitability. And so that security threats. Yeah, please.
Oh, we have a question that came in. What do I have to offer to clients that have less than 25 users? I deal with mostly small businesses.
That's a great question, and actually our kind of bread and butter is, eFolder started out focused exclusively on small, medium business, and so 25 users is 25 to 50 is kind of like a sweet spot, and a majority of our partner base is in that exact sweet spot. And so we have a 25-user package, for example, that gives you 25 seats and some storage coupled with that for, I believe, it's $125 a month, if I remember correctly, but don't quote me on that price. I have to double check our price sheets. But yes, we can definitely meet that need. As I said, that's kind of a sweet spot for us. Many of our MSPs have 10, 20, 30 clients that have 25 users each. And so they just keep adding on these new user seat bundles and packages.
And I guess that's just to interject, the important point, I'm pretty familiar with the eFolder pricing structure. It's like that's 25 seats as a minimum to you, the MSP, but you can split that between five-person companies. So, the reality is that, you can, that's the minimum license for you, but you can split it up between the small businesses that you serve.
Great clarification. Thank you, Ted. And so all of these MSP pains that have been answered with our value props for Anchor, that's what makes Anchor invincible productivity here. So just going to move along then to diving a little bit deeper into the client value proposition. So we've got the seamless user experience and secure collaboration to empower end users to really work with anyone, anywhere, no matter where they are and no matter where that colleague might be or that contractor outside of the organization. And so the desktop clients and all of these other applications, they give users 24/7 access to their synced data. So we've got desktop clients that work and support Windows, Mac, and we have an Outlook add-in so that if you exclusively want to use the Outlook add-in, data never touches the device or the file system. It keeps everything secured in the cloud. We also have an Android app, an iOS app, and a Windows Phone app. And then we also, this is a screenshot of the desktop client, and you've got files and folders that sync to the cloud and across these devices, and you have team shares, which are kind of those collaboration spaces for an organization to have their data. So you might have a sales and marketing team share, where the sales team and the marketing team collaborate and create content and edit content within that share. All of that can be syncing to your desktop client, or you can choose specifically which ones you want to sync to that desktop client and leave others on that cloud, on that server, so you don't have to use any of that local storage to hold it. And you can generate share links directly with a right-click context menu. You can generate backups with a right-click context menu, backups of content outside of the sync folder, for example. This is what we're looking at here. And you can also right-click and go into the collaborative web editor on files specifically that are supported, so those documents, presentations, and spreadsheets. So it does complement Microsoft Office, and at times we see partners even replacing Microsoft Office for those productivity tools in the sense of PowerPoint, Word, and Excel. It does not replace the email collaboration aspect, though, and that's why we built an add-in for Microsoft Outlook. And just looking a little bit more into some of these screenshots of the product, here we have the ability to browse revisions. So you can right-click from the desktop. It'll redirect you to the web interface. You can restore any file or folder to a previous point in time, and you can do it granularly to a file at a specific point in time, or you can do it on a very large scale in the event of ransomware to an entire folder, an entire root, the entire system, for example. And then this is a screenshot of our collaborative web editor here. So this is the document editor, and you can see that there's real-time chat and comments. There's track changes for the review process, and you can collaborate with others in real time. So many can join in an active session. There are no limitations to how many users can be in there. And so that's on the client level. So an end user will be able to, securely access their data on their desktop. They'll be able to share and collaborate with others, and they'll be able to even create and edit content in the web, all protected by the Anchor system. And then as we transition over here into the MSP value props, we've got that automation, the high margin recurring revenue, and the business continuity. And I'll dive a little bit into some features here that help out with that. So for the high margin recurring revenue, we want to drive this point that it's all white labeled. It all has the ability to slap your logo on it, rebrand it as you need, and you can customize those policies per organization. So as Ted alluded to, a 25 user pack, that can be split up of 5 users for 5 clients of yours. And you can create 5 client organizations here underneath your parent organization, and each of those 5 client orgs has 5 users underneath there. You can customize each one of those organizations as you see fit. So each one of them can be unique to fit and serve those client needs. And additionally, we've got the automation side, where we have activity and alerting, and then also automated reporting. And we integrate in with, Active Directory, as I said, professional services automation, RMM tool agnostic. So RMM tools can monitor all sorts of event IDs and trigger any alert that needs to take place. And then also email integration. And so, ultimately, like I said, I keep saying set it and forget it. We really want the actionable information to come to the fingertips of the IT administrators so that they can take immediate action on it, rather than having to pull information from the system and scan through it to look for things to do. We want it to just push directly to them based on the parameters and the thresholds that they've set. And also for the business continuity side, as I've said, there are policies that can be used to manage data retention and even to obfuscate destructive features like can users delete data, can users purge data, et cetera. And the snapshot feature is really the distinctive competency here from the disaster recoverability side of life. And this allows you to roll back any data to a specific point in time prior to infection. So some of the other players out in the space might have revision rollback or restore deleted, which we have. And snapshot implies both of those and does more. So if the data is renamed and moved to a different directory, it's deleted and a new one is created. Some of those competitor features don't actually address ransomware recoverability at at that point. Snapshot does. It's like Time Machine for Mac OS. It's like System Restore for Windows. It takes you directly back to a point in time at the root level. And so it's super valuable. It creates a copy of that data. Also, you can use that just for data management purposes, whatever is needed there. And also, the remote wipe side of life. So if a device is lost or stolen, you can remotely wipe it, and you can manage your data from a remote setting. So IT administrators can log in and be able to see anything from the administrative portal, and they can remote wipe any of these machines. They can even generate backups from the web interface. So let's say Ted has Anchor installed on his desktop client. If I'm the administrator, I can generate backups of Ted's machine while not being in his physical location and not needing to use RDP protocols, remote desktop protocol, to get in there and manually drive it. I can just click a button here on the Anchor user administrative portal and generate some of those backups and restore them as needed. And, Anchor's HIPAA compliant, SOX compliant. We've got some of the best data centers in the world, and, military grade encryption. I won't bore you with the, the buzzwords there. And that's, I think, in a nutshell. I know I went very quickly, but that's what makes Anchor invincible productivity, and I appreciate everybody's attention there and look forward to the questions. I'll pass it back over to Ted, unless Tracy has any questions to ask now.
Sure, I have one question. It's, can I invite guests into Anchor to work on a document?
Great question. Yes, you can. So Anchor system will, if you know their email address of the guest, you can create a share link and add that email address to that share recipients. And then that guest user will receive an email with the share link and receive guest credentials. If it's a secure share link, then they will be asked to authenticate before accessing it. But we also have anonymous editing. So you can choose to make the collaborative web editing experience anonymous, and any user with that share link can jump into that collaborative web editing session. So many layers and levels of security that you get to choose on how secure you want your collaboration to be. Thank you.
Okay, well let's move to kind of our summary here and talk about what we've just seen and how it all fits together. So Matt introduced the concept of file server enablement, where you can take a legacy file server that's on-prem at your clients and connect it to the Anchor service and connect it to the cloud. Now, I also started out showing you how a cloud workspace is really about migrating on-prem Windows infrastructure to the cloud, and that includes the file server. So the beauty is you can deploy an Itopia-powered solution, Google-powered workspace up into the cloud, and then layer on top Anchor. And one of the cool things you could do is you can take the file server that you've now provisioned in the Google Cloud and you can connect it to the Anchor service to deliver all the benefits that Matt talked about in the Anchor product: sharing, sending large files, collaborating online, and just having a more agile way to sync and collaborate with content. And so what I'm showing here on this slide is I'm actually done a proof of concept where I've deployed a cloud workspace in the Google Cloud using the Itopia cloud automation and management tool. And so I've got a file server up there. I have a marketing and a sales directory. And then what I've done is I've mapped those to team shares in the Anchor service, and so to leverage file server enablement. And then what I'm going to show you here is I'm logged into a cloud workspace. So I'm on a local Windows host, and I've now RDP'd into my cloud workspace. And what you see here on the left is the ability on a day-to-day basis for the user to use basically shares, the traditional file server technology to work with content. So that's all good and well. That's the traditional benefits of working on a file server. But then now I've connected this file server to the Anchor service, and here I'm in the Anchor web portal. And so now users can access their files from any web browser, anywhere they go in the world, to get access to their content. So that's kind of a very basic use case. And then, of course, with mobile, then here I am on my mobile phone, on my Android phone, and now instead of having to fire up a full-blown desktop experience to quickly get a couple files and share it with a colleague or a client, I just use my Anchor file sync tool on my Android phone to quickly browse the file directories of the file server and sync and collaborate and share content very easily. So this is kind of, in my view, the beauty of how these solutions come together. Having a cloud desktop or a cloud workspace with file sync, and then adding a solution like Anchor extends productivity to the smartphone, giving you that on-the-go productivity. You're able to share large files in a secure fashion with sending a link instead of the actual file attached to an email. You're able to, modernize, if you will, the file server, whether it's on-prem or cloud-hosted. You're able to serve different kinds of user communities. Sometimes, like we have some Itopia and Anchor partners, we have a lot in common. Sometimes they'll have a client where they just have remote users who just need web access to files because they're a contractor or they're a temporary employee or there's a special project. And so you can serve different kinds of users. You can do hybrid deployments. So you might have certain users inside a client that need a cloud desktop, and there might be others that have a local machine, but you want to make sure that they all stay in sync with their content and files. And that's where you can combine these two solutions together. And then the last use case would be that road warrior, that worker that needs offline access to their files, even though they may be working in a cloud workspace most of the time. But when they're on the go or on an airplane, they want to have access to their files. So again, these two solutions combine together and complement each other. I want to remind you, let's get your questions in. So we have a couple more minutes to answer your questions. If you're interested in Itopia pricing, we also have a 25 user minimum. Pricing starts at $199. You can see the full details at itopia.com/pricing. One of the key things we're really evangelizing with MSPs is to understand what public cloud services like Google Cloud cost. And you can go and play around with this by going to itopia.com/calculator. You can do a custom quotation for a hypothetical client environment, or if you have a real deployment coming up, you can actually price out what the Google infrastructure will cost. And it's very easy to get started with Itopia. You can activate a 30-day free trial on our website at itopia.com/register, and we can get you access to upwards of $500 of credits for the Google Cloud to kick the tires. And Matt, if you would, why don't you just tell folks how they can get started with Anchor as well?
Yeah, on the Anchor website, so that's efolder.net, and you'll see a list of products there, Anchor being one of them, and you can sign up for a 14 or 21-day trial. And you can, if you want to do private cloud, that means that you'll be downloading and installing the Anchor server, and then you can set it up in your own infrastructure. We support Windows operating systems for private cloud. And if you want to download it on SaaS right away, you could get started immediately without requiring that infrastructure, and you can download the desktop client and get things started up with an organization that's in trial mode.
Okay. All right. So let's, Tracy, let's go to full Q&A here for the last couple of minutes.
Great. I'll do that. Ted, I have a question for you, and it's, does Itopia support management of Google Apps?
You could think about you could think about Office 365 and G Suite living on top of the cloud workspace. So that's not an area where we provide any automation or management today. It's more we're delivering the core desktop experience, and then in the case of Office, you would install the Office 365 suite of local apps on the terminal server or RDS host. And then that Office productivity experience will be available when they log into their cloud workspace. And then G Suite is different, of course. It's more web-based collaboration and document creation and management. But there's no actual Itopia hooks into either of those. But they often get deployed right inside the total solution.
Okay, very good. Here's another question. This is somebody who joined a little late, so he wasn't sure if you'd cover this or not. And it's, do you have any ballpark estimate of monthly cost of 10 hosted desktops and a simple file server in the Google Cloud? And he says managed by Itopia, of course, with, say, 100 gigabytes of user files.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is go to itopia.com/calculator to do a custom quotation, but I can make some rough estimates. Basically, what we see is that what we recommend to MSPs, before you talk about adding line of business applications or office productivity suites and that sort of thing, or even adding on Anchor, what we see is that the retail price of a desktop as a service, if you just talk the vanilla desktop experience, we recommend anywhere between $60 to $100 retail for the desktop experience. And we recommend that you really layer that on top of your core managed service offering. So if you're already charging $125 or $150 per user per month just to manage on-premises infrastructure and you do a migration to the cloud, we think you should be adding $50 to $100 on top of that, $50 to $60 to $100 on top of that for the retail desktop experience. Now, the reality is for the smaller clients, you need to price it a little bit higher to have the same margins. And then for the larger clients, of course, it's a volume thing. You know, you can be a little bit more aggressive on pricing. But the important point is don't give away the desktop experience for free, because you got to remember what we used to do is we used to charge the client $20,000 or $40,000 to refresh all of their on-prem infrastructure with a project to install and configure all of it. And you would make, 50% gross margins on your labor and 20% gross margins on the product. And okay, now we've shifted that infrastructure to the cloud. And the important point, like Microsoft, is to monetize the desktop experience and to deliver it as an evergreen service. So that's some counsel on retail pricing. And what you'll find when you use the Itopia cost calculator for Google Cloud is you'll see the wholesale infrastructure costs of delivering this sort of solution from the Google Cloud.
Okay, thank you. How about a question for you, Matt? And it's, does Anchor replace my file server, or can I keep my file server with Anchor?
Yep, great question, and that's typically one of the most common questions. And the answer is you get to choose. So you can have, it doesn't necessarily replace your file server because it doesn't come in as a file server itself, but it eliminates the need for a file server. So you take your file server and you can eliminate it by taking all of that data and putting it up into the Anchor Cloud. And you have a choice then. You can choose to take away your file server, or you can keep that file server on site, on location.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And here's another question. Let's see. They're saying there's kind of a comment, and just they're saying you must use the correct Office 365 version.
Yeah, I'll address that. We've had a couple questions about layering on the productivity apps, and most MSPs out there have a very deep relationship with Microsoft and a lot of your clients as well. So yes, it's an important point. When you deploy a cloud workspace into Google Cloud and you're using RDS technology, you do need to license the proper version of Office 365. So that means that you have to license the E3 version because you're installing it on the terminal server or RDS host. And in a shared compute environment, you need to make sure you're licensing the right version of Office 365. So Andy, great comment. Thank you for the reminder. Very helpful.
Okay. Why don't I give one more to Matt and then close out the event unless you have any objections. So Matt, how do I sell Anchor? What's that?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, sure. How do I sell Anchor to my clients if they already have tools like Dropbox, OneDrive, or Google Drive?
Awesome question, and that kind of relates to another question that came in regarding retention. And so unlike some of those other consumer-grade products that might have a business, labeled solution. For example, Dropbox has the end user consumer grade, then they have business grade, all the way up to the enterprise level. And none of those address data protection and disaster recovery like Anchor does. There's no other product in the market that is able to provide you with the data protection and the recoverability, coupled with the secure collaboration that Anchor has. And so whereas there's kind of a small barrier to entry there because most people are familiar with Dropbox or Google Drive and things like that, it does come with its concerns with the data protection, disaster recovery side of life. And unlimited retention is something that's offered through Anchor, and that's something that you can't really get anywhere else. So we really care about the ability to protect your data and to grant you immediate recoverability.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. I'd like to thank you both for your presentations today and for taking the time to be with us. And I'd also like to thank the audience for attending today's webcast. The webcast was sponsored by Atopia and presented by Redmond Channel Partner. Thanks again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
And that does conclude today's conference call. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. You may now disconnect.